Hello and welcome to the 4th Annual Federal Research Update webinar. My name is Dr. Heather Brown. I'm the Director of Grant Writing and Publications at the University of Missouri-Columbia. I'm very pleased to welcome you today. This event is sponsored by the University of Missouri-Columbia, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, and the Florida High-Tech Corridor Council and Economic Development Initiative of the State University System of Florida. During today's broadcast, if you have any technology issues or concerns or problems, please send an email to federalupdate@missouri.edu. That same email address is where you can also send questions that you'd like our presenter to answer. Again, that email address is federalupdate@missouri.edu. Finally, we've got viewers joining us from all over the country, and so instead of using specific times, we're going to use phrases such as top of the hour and bottom of the hour to indicate when our next speaker will be beginning. So let's get started. I am very pleased to present Dr. Mark Poth. Dr. Poth serves as the Division Director of the Bioenergy Division in the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate, and Environment, part of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Dr. Poth directs the Institute's research, education, and extension programs, which are all focused on the development of socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable bioenergy for the United States. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Poth.
Thank you very much. It's great to be that I'm able to be with you today, despite hurricanes and other such instances. What I'm going to talk about today is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which is the chief extramural funding arm of USDA. We're a relatively new organization out of an older agency. The Farm Bill of 2008 organized us according to the chart here. The structure is very similar to what they have at the National Institutes of Health, where we have sub-institutes that cover the major issues associated with the broad agricultural mission. So there's, of course, food production and sustainability, bioenergy, climate, and environment, because you've got to have a stable climate and good conditions to produce food. But then there's also food safety and nutrition, things about issues related to the consumption of food. We are the home of 4-H, so we have an Institute of Youth, Family, and Community. And then, of course, we have all the necessary sort of admin kinds of offices that you need if you run an agency here in Washington. Secretary of Agriculture is Tom Vilsack, former governor of Iowa. Our undersecretary, who is now the chief scientist for USDA, is Dr. Kathy Wotecki, who was once the chief scientist for Mars. So if you want to talk about chocolate, talk to Kathy. Dr. Sunny Ramaswamy is our new director for the agency. Now, a little bit about the agency. As I said, it was created by the 2008 Farm Bill, and some of the things I'm going to talk about today are kind of in limbo because of our friends down the street up on Capitol Hill. That's because they've let the Farm Bill expire. It's written every 5 years, and we have some issues related to some programs that are up to Congress's discretion on whether or not they will continue. However, broadly, the National Institute of Food and Ag does three kinds of things. We support research, but we also support education and extension, and we've got the definitions here. Now, you'll hear other agencies talk about research integration, and what they mean typically there is they're looking at integrating different research disciplines. When we talk about integration in our programs, we're looking for you to not combine different research disciplines, but to do some combination of research, education, and extension, or informal education out to the public and extension. Okay, so what kind of programs do we have? Well, since we're an old agency, Congress has had a lot of time to work on different sorts of programs responding to different stakeholders. This has given us a real wealth of different programs within the agency. We've got over 30 different programs with different eligibilities, targeted to different audiences. Some are broad, some are narrow, and it really takes some work to explore them. I've got some of them listed here. There's the Ag and Food Research Initiative, AFRI, which is our largest program at $264 million. Specialty Crops Research Initiative at about $40 million. We run a fellows program for pre-doctoral and postdoctoral students that's about $7 million. Small Business Innovation Research at $18 million, Biotech Risk, Sustainable Agriculture, the SARE program, and there are several others. Well, what are the keys to competitive success? And I've tried to summarize these for you so you can have sort of a roadmap to think about how to operate through our agency. One of the keys is to understand our mission. NIFA is a mission agency. It's not something where we have broad license to do anything and everything. We really have a mission that's about agriculture. However, the key thing for our agency is to explore the full range of programs. We have a lot of options. The key is to find the advantage for your institution and the team that you can put together. Many of our goals are nationwide, for instance, childhood nutrition, improving childhood nutrition. But guess what? There will not be a single solution that works everywhere in the country. It'll be a series of tailored regional to local solutions to improve childhood nutrition, and no one is better situated than you are to work with the folks in your region of the country. Communication with the national program leader. Our program staff, national program leaders, are listed in our request for application. They're also listed on our website. They're very knowledgeable, and their contact information is listed. Please contact them and talk to them. The final key to success is what I'm calling persistent participation. You can't just do that, well, I tried it once and it didn't work, gosh, I guess I'll give up. No, it's a craft that needs to be worked at. You can get better. Look around at the people who do get funded competitively. It's a skill that can be honed and developed. So I would say participation is a key. One way to participate is as a reviewer. You can be on a peer review panel, have your faculty on a peer review panel, or they can be an ad hoc reviewer, review online for us. Participate in attending grantsmanship workshops. We hold these from time to time here in Washington. And finally, you have to apply, that's the learn by doing method, get your application together and send it in. And then if you're funded, for us, you become a project director. So that would be the ultimate goal and way to participate is as a project director when you're funded by us. Well, let's talk a little bit about the AFRI program and discuss some of the options that you have there where you can see where your opportunities lie. One of the questions we get is, well, you're in USDA and USDA has a tight relationship with land-grant universities, so all the money goes to land grants, right? Well, the Ag and Food Research Initiative has very broad eligibility, including not just land-grant universities, but any college or university. In fact, private research organizations, NGOs, even individuals are eligible if they want to go to that. And based on this slide, you can see that folks at non-grant land-grant public universities actually have a better funding record than the land-grant universities in getting funds compared to number of applications versus percentage of grant funds that they're receiving. Private colleges do even better, research organizations do pretty well, and of course there's a whole range of other folks that apply that I haven't summarized here. Well, how is AFRI organized? There's a foundational RFA that supports fundamental science to expand our knowledge base to respond to issues in the future. They cover these 6 congressionally mandated areas. It's basically plant health and production, animal health and production, food safety, nutrition and health, renewable energy, natural resources and the environment, ag systems and technology, including engineering approaches, and ag economics and rural communities, really our social science effort there. Now we've also have program announcements or requests for applications for challenge areas that have been identified by the department. These are areas where we think that we've invested a lot in fundamental research, we have a good foundation there, and the question is, can we really translate that knowledge into an outcome, into making a difference for the nation? So we're doing grants here where we look to do that, and we're doing that for childhood obesity prevention, climate change, global food security, food safety, and sustainable bioenergy. Well, when the RFAs come out in those areas, what do? One of the key things to pay attention to is that in many cases, letters of intent are required for our programs. If you submit an application without a letter of intent, we do not accept your application. So please be aware of that. That's becoming more and more common across all our programs. It really is something we have to do to be able to manage the review process And as our travel budgets get squeezed, you know, we bring in the peer reviewers from out of town to meet here in Washington. As our budgets get squeezed, we do need more and more time to try and put those together. So get them in by the deadline and make sure they're in PDF. Well, what are the kinds of grants that you can get? Well, of course, there's the standard grants that are asked for across all these programs. But there are some special categories of grants where you might have an advantage. In our Food and Agricultural Science Enhancement grants. These include our fellowships. We do have a new investigator category as well across the Ag and Food Research Initiative. But then we have strengthening grants that can provide funding for sabbaticals, equipment, seed grants. These are smaller grants to allow you to collect preliminary data, and standard grants, which are really regular grants that are funded out of a set-aside pool. Well, let's talk a little bit about, you know, so what's the level of competition for the Ag and Food Research Initiative? A typical program might get 100 applications, and we might fund up to 20. So you're thinking, well, your chances are 20%. Well, actually, your chances are much higher if you're eligible for funding under the phase program. Here's how that works. phase is funded with a 7.5% set aside from the total appropriation for the Ag and Food Research Initiative. So in 2012, that was $19 million. Now the eligibility here is limited to EPSCoR states, so check our request for applications to see which states are in our EPSCoR list. And small size institution, small to mid-size institution, that's enrollment of 17,500. You must not be in the top 100 for federal funding, or you can be a minority serving institution. So that's a long list of things, and people say, well, I don't have all that. Well, you don't need all of that. You get any one and you're in, right? So you're in an EPSCoR state, you're in. You're a small to mid-sized institution, you're in. You're a minority serving institution, you made it and qualified for this pool. The key thing is you can't be in that top 100 most successful institutions. So even though, you know, Caltech cannot squeak in there. All right. So you can get funded from this set-aside pool depending on how you rank then. The award types for strengthening are the standard strengthening awards. This is a second chance for funding. Remember, the panel meets and they're going to rank the 100 applications. We fund according to the panel's ranking from first to worst. You know, they rank them. And we go down the list and fund with whatever funding we have. Remember, we have those two buckets of money, the regular money and the strengthening money. So we go down the list with the regular money, and maybe that's number 17 or 18. We're out of funds then in the regular money. Now we go to the strengthening bucket, and we look down the list to see who's eligible for that. And that may be far below number 20. It may be number 30, 40. And if that's the case, and that's your application, you get funded. Now there are standard awards. There are also other kinds of awards. There's career enhancement awards, which are sort of a sabbatical kind of an award. Now these awards are structured not like the classical sabbatical where you're going to take a year off and go to the Sorbonne and write your book because family interactions are just too complex these days. It's hard to find time to be able to do that kind of thing. So we look for you to creatively structure this. Maybe, you know, Cold Springs Harbor class, something at somebody else's lab, some other interactions, you know, put together something that's going to add new skills to the submitter's repertoire and something that can be built upon. Seed grants up to $150,000 for preliminary data, and equipment grants, which are the only kind of grant that AFRI makes that requires any kind of a match. But however, equipment grants have a very high success rate, and if you do have any kind of non-federal equipment budget, isn't this an easy way to double up your equipment budget? So if you're at one of these eligible institutions, what do? I would say that you need to step back and think about your strategy. What is your strategy for how you're going to be successful in the future? How are you going to link awards and leverage grants? You know, where are you? What kind of things do you need? Do you need equipment or training? Do you need preliminary data? That's really going to dictate how you put things together. And I would encourage you to have, say, a 3 to 5 year plan. How am I going to link these awards together and be more successful in the future? And how will this fit with you know, the unique advantages at your institution? What's there that you can really build upon or link to? You may want to, if you're eligible for this strengthening, take a close look at programs. Our largest awards are Coordinated Agricultural Projects, or CAP awards. These awards go up to about $10 million. Many times you'll see a program and it says, well, it's offering CAP awards. However, anything that's offering in AFRI that's offering CAP awards will also take those strengthening applications for seed grants and sabbaticals, equipment grants. So look closely at all those programs. Don't just write them off. Panel participation. We need panelists from all regions of the country. We need faculty at all levels. And we need folks from minority serving institutions. We track all of this closely, and we actually publish statistics on this. And if you're interested in serving, you can send an email to our new reviewer email address, or you can contact the national program leader that's in our request for applications and shoot them a quick email and ask faculty to include a short CV, a 2-page CV about that. You'd be surprised what kind of boxes we get in building out panels. We look for regional diversity, faculty level. We can't have 2 people from the same institution. We're avoiding conflicts with the applications that are submitted. So many times, even though our database has over 20,000 reviewers in it, many times we're stuck and we are looking for specific reviewers. Now, if faculty are going to participate in our panels, there's really a supporting role that's vital from administrators. Panel participation represents a large workload. There's going to be 15 to 20 applications to review. It takes most reviewers about 40 hours to do that, and all this must be done before they come to Washington, D.C. Now, we're going to pay their travel, so there's no problem with that. But freeing up this time before they come to Washington to get those reviews done really is going to take some effort from the administrators to give them release time from teaching or other duties. Our panels are on a fixed timeline. We try to get things done as quickly as possible. However, we're subject to limitations related to when Congress appropriates the money, you know, for when we can schedule things. It seems lately that it's an unfailing axiom that whatever time we can finally get panels scheduled for is the most inconvenient time possible for universities. It's going to be finals week. It's going to be, you know, some other event, some big committee meetings or something. So this is where, again, administrators have to work with faculty to free up the time so that faculty members can come to Washington. It's an invaluable experience about what works in applications and is successful for funding, but also it is a great experience for seeing those small things that can send you down. Grantsmanship workshops. We provide grantsmanship workshops. We're working hard on restructuring those. We offer them in Washington, D.C. Provides an overview of the program to applicants, all of our programs. It provides a mock peer review panel so you can see what the interactions are like on a peer review panel. There's FaceTime with national program leaders. So since why do we hold it here in Washington? Gosh, it's so inconvenient. Well, that's how we can get most of our staff to participate, so you can meet face to face with the people who run the programs that are of interest to you. We have tips on grant writing. We also offer travel fellowships to faculty from minority serving institutions. Now, that's sort of the thumbnail sketch of our grantsmanship workshops, but you need to think about your role at these workshops too. You know, what do you do when you come? The workshops are really structured for faculty that will be preparing applications. Now, there's a separate workshop that we hold, a week-long one, for grants administrators that's offered every year. So if you're interested in administrative detail and do's and don'ts related to certain kinds of grants, there's a completely separate workshop for that. Individual faculty, before coming to our grantsmanship workshops, to do their homework and check the website. Who runs the programs in their area of interest? You know, you're a plant geneticist. Well, who's involved in those programs? Who do you want to see? Send them an email ahead of time. And then at the workshop, faculty need to use their time to engage, introduce themselves to national program leaders, offer to serve on a panel, follow up with an email and a CV, network with other people, other faculty from your region or elsewhere, where you might be able to team up for larger awards or do anything to be more competitive. Let's talk about submitting applications, some preliminary tips. Start early. Read the request for applications. There will be details in there that are important. Contact our agency with any questions or to discuss ideas. We're always open to faculty sending us an email paragraph even before the letter of intent is due about, hey, I'm thinking about this or that. Does that seem right for this program? Or, what do you mean by that? NPLs are happy to talk to folks about that. And of course, we talked about letters of intent earlier. Let's do a little overview of the competitive grant proposal process. So the application process, it's posted on our website, but also it's going to be on, the request for applications will be posted on there. It'll also be at the grants.gov website, so you can register there and get notifications when our RFAs are out. But you can sort of survey them on our grant site, which is a little bit better than grants.gov, a little more friendly. And you can then explore them there. The project directors submit a letter of intent when applicable, and that's in advance of the proposal deadline. In developing proposals, you need to follow the specific goals and priorities published in the RFA as well as the published deadlines. The guidelines are provided in the RFA. You submit the proposal electronically to grants.gov, and we're now recommending that you start 72 hours ahead of time to submit. This is because of recent glitches. If you're a grants administrator, you've been trying to use the SAM system, some of these other things to get everything lined up with the CCR registry, your DUNS number, all of that. Turns out if you're a smaller institution and these haven't been used in a while, they can expire, and there's nothing worse than trying to submit 10 minutes before the deadline and your membership has expired, your pass number has expired, and you can't get it in, and you're done. Okay, once your application gets submitted to us, remember our national program leaders are typically involved in several programs, so depending on how those are staggered, it may take them 4 weeks to get back to you and acknowledge that they've got your proposal. But you should get an email that acknowledges that we have your proposal. You'll get one from grants.gov, which can be a little confusing because grants.gov says, hey, we got your proposal, it's great, and it's going on to the agency. Well, what does that mean? Well, grants.gov really serves the role Federal Express played when we did this by paper. What they mean is they got all the right address information on the front. It seems like there's stuff on all your forms, and they forwarded that to us. However, if we open that up and things are not in PDF but in Word format, or there's incomplete information or other invalid things, you still may not be in the program. So you want to get that email from the NPL. They're going to also have a timeline in there about when the panel is and sort of when you can expect notification on panel results. If there are any changes for the project director or your institution, you need to let the national program leader know about that as well. Okay. At the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, we use a competitive peer review process. It's a process that was highly rated by the National Research Council in a past review. We actually have them engaged for a new 2-year review of our Ag and Food Research Initiative review process and other aspects of the program. The review process is designed to be scholarly and fair. You bring in peers and other experts as appropriate. They provide both written and verbal evaluations, so they're going to provide written documentation about what they thought about your application. But there's also a broad discussion in the panel about your application. Understand the review process for your specific program. You need to think about how things get reviewed and for your particular program of interest. And that can change depending on whether it's a research, education, or extension program, or if it's an integrated program. A key to that are the program-dependent evaluation factors that are in every request for applications. Now, the review process is co-led by the national program leader and a panel manager. Now, neither the national program leader or the panel manager influence the evaluation of any particular proposal. They don't offer opinions on the work at all. That's the job of the panel. They are there to ensure that each application gets a fair review. So who is this panel manager that we hire? Well, we want somebody who's current in the field that's appropriate for this particular program. So we're looking for a leader in the field of science. We want somebody who's knowledgeable about current trends. And we actually hire them as a part-time USDA employee for 1 or 2 years, maybe 2 panel cycles at most. Now, both the national program leader and the panel manager are going to study the proposals and figure out what kind of expertise is needed. They're going to be doing this from the time that the letters of intent come in. They're going to invite the appropriate experts for the panel, and then they assign the proposals to the panelists. There's a minimum of 3 reviewers for each application. The number of panelists can vary depending on the number of applications to the program. And external ad hoc reviewers who review only online for us are typically brought in when we have unique needs for a program. Excuse me. Usually that involves a particular application or two that are using unusual methods or specific sites or other things where we want to have particular expertise and input on that. Panel member selection, as I mentioned, we're looking for a diverse panel. Here's a breakdown on some of the categories that we look at as far as assembling the panel. We also look for continuity. So we look to bring back people. If this is an ongoing program that we offer year after year, we look to bring back people from last year's panel, perhaps a quarter of last year's panel, to have them serve again. And this is particularly valuable for applications to get resubmitted and following up on response to previous reviews. So the panelist is going to review a whole bunch of proposals. They're going to provide scientific, constructive, and fair evaluation according to the review criteria in the RFA. Now they're going to also protect confidentiality, and they're going to avoid conflicts of interest. Well, what do we mean by that? Proposal content and identity of the applicant are confidential. Reviewer identity is confidential. The reviews are only shared with the project director. So if there's a team going in on this and other members of the team say, hey, can you give us the reviews? No, they go only to the project director. Also, anything said in the panel proceedings is confidential. This allows us to have an open and frank discussion in the panel about the merits of every application. Conflicts of interest, advisors and advisees. So you have a lifetime conflict with your major professor, and if you're a major professor, you have a lifetime conflict with your former students. Collaborators and co-authors over the last 3 years. Institutional conflicts. So if you're at Northwest State U, you cannot review anybody's application from Northwest State U. Anyone who stands to profit materially from an award decision, so we don't want any fiduciary connections, and other personal reasons as defined by the reviewer. Now, who does this all apply to? It applies to everybody involved in the review process, including the national program leader and the panel manager. They may not participate in any aspect of the evaluation. In fact, when that application comes up for discussion in the panel room, those in conflict must leave the room. Leave the room. Finally, at the end of the panel, there's a broad discussion of all the applications and how they should be ranked. And if once that process is underway, anybody in conflict may not offer any comments on application they're in conflict with. So reviewers prepare written reviews before the panel meeting here in Washington. So they're going to use the RFA evaluation criteria, our online reviewing system, enter their reviews, and then they're going to rate your application as excellent to poor. Well, what are those evaluation criteria? Well, for AFRI research grants, there are really three. There's scientific merit, qualifications, and relevance to U.S. agriculture. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, there's quite a discussion in the RFA about what we mean by that. For scientific merit, we're looking for novel, innovative, unique, and original. For model systems, we're looking for the ability to transfer that knowledge to ag organisms. Remember, I said we're a mission agency, so it's great to study, model organisms, but can you really translate the stuff in mice to cattle? Okay, conceptual adequacy of the research, clarity, delineation of objectives. Suitability of the methods, feasibility of the methods. Preliminary data can help with this. Probability of success, and this is not so much a sure thing that we're looking for, but we ask the panel to balance risk versus reward. This is federal research funding. We should take some risks, gamble on getting some high payoffs, and we ask the panel to wrestle with that. Okay, qualifications for the personnel, adequacy of facilities project management. Well, is this some folks new to the grantscape think, oh gosh, this is a real barrier for me because I'm going to be up against members of the National Academy of Sciences and other great folks, and gosh, how can I get started? You really need to have faculty think of this as more of a pass-fail element. It's not a barrier for new faculty. They're going to look at, have you published something in this area? At least a few things. Do you know what you're talking about? Then it'll be good. They're also going to look for awareness of alternative approaches and pitfalls in what's proposed. So if there's some risk here, you've got to be honest and be frank and say, we're trying something, we know it's kind of a gamble here, but if it doesn't work, we've thought of some options. Planning and administration of the project, does this program ask for a management plan? So if they'd asked for a management plan in some of our larger grants, it's going to ask for that. Please make sure you pay close attention to that. Institutional experience and competence. This is for the larger grants, again, where we're looking for a commitment to really participate and manage what may be a multi-million-dollar award. Adequate facilities and instrumentation. Again, this is another pass-fail kind of element. It really doesn't matter if your institution has one greenhouse or 100. If all you need is one greenhouse to do the study and it's available, that's fine. Project relevance. Now, relevance to agriculture, but what we mean by that is relevance to agriculture as defined in the request for application. The request for application has been framed with stakeholder input from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, other linkage to other federal agencies. There's been a lot of work that's gone into that, so you have to look at what the RFA is specifically identifying as relevance to agriculture. Now, I've just gone through the evaluation criteria for research grants. Now, depending on the grant type, they can be very, very different. For instance, fellowships call for a mentoring plan. Equipment grants ask for who's going to use it and how it's going to be shared. So please take a look for the criteria of the particular grant that you're interested in. During the panel meeting, remember the 3 reviewers that got assigned. There's a primary, secondary, and tertiary reviewer. Primary reviewer is going to say, here's what the proposal is about and what they're proposing to do, and it would go like this. Then the secondary and tertiary chip in. Any ad hoc reviews that they were used will be read by one of the reviewers. If there's a response to last year's panel summary that's part of the review, it'll be discussed if this is a resubmission. Then, then there's an open discussion with everyone on the panel. Everyone on the panel gets a copy of all applications they are not in conflict with. That's the advantage of sending everybody a CD and setting this up online. It's not like we have to FedEx them all hard copies. So many people may have been interested and actually read the application. So there can be extended discussions a Q&A session about the methodology, the approach, the expected outcomes, the preliminary data, the strength of the preliminary data, the strength of the approach, a lot going on there that'll determine the final rating. So the panel discussion happens, and they're going to rate the application anywhere from outstanding to do not fund. If a program is really oversubscribed so that there's a huge number of applications and there's simply not enough time in a week to discuss them all. If you remember those ratings we had before that went, outstanding to poor, if anything, all the applications that ended up with nothing above a fair, the panels asked if it's okay to put those into the triage category, and then they are not looked at any further. Okay, they're going to go through all of these, discuss them, and then we'll prepare a panel summary for these, for all the applications. Now, the panel summary is based on not just those initial reviews where they said excellent, poor, fair. Remember, because each reviewer and the panel as a whole may have uncovered other aspects of the proposal that need help or that got the panel very excited. So you're going to get a summary that's going to have positive aspects, negative aspects, and synthesis comments from the panel about the application. So the panel meeting on the final day, they come back and they revisit all the categories. Remember, we had outstanding, high priority, medium priority. They're going to go back through all of those to make sure that there weren't some outliers there. Maybe on the first day of the panel they were too tough, and now that they've seen them all, they really have some that need to move up a category or two. So there'll be an overall discussion about the numerical ranking of the applications. Sometimes, depending on the money that's available, they may not rank specifically in order more than the top half of the applications. Okay, funding of the ranked applications. Budget was not a review criteria other than if, and it says so in all of our RFAs, if you submit an application that's over what the program asks for, sets as a budget limit, your application is returned without review. So please pay careful attention to the budget limits. Now, after they've all been ranked, that's where they will go through and talk about, well, does this seem like too much for this or not enough, or adjustments will be made according to recommendations from the panel. Now, the national program and the panel manager will make the funding decision for those things below the line. Remember, I talked about the strengthening funds, and they're going to go use the one bucket of money for the first few down the list, and then they have that smaller amount, and they're going to look down the list and find those. And then they prepare the summary materials for approval by folks on up the line, so that it's not just one or two people making a funding decision, but this is checked all along the way. Okay, it's after the panel, and you didn't get funded. What do? Oh gosh, you're going to get an email or a letter from the national program leader saying that we're sorry, but we've declined funding of your application. It's going to have a return of the written reviews, the panel summary, and a relative ranking of that application. What you want to get in terms of your application is the phone call. Because the phone call is going to be about getting the money. You're going to get the reviews, panel summary, and relative ranking, but then you're also going to get a bunch of paperwork to do to complete the award. That'll include things for us like the current research information system reports and other assorted fun stuff. After the panel manager is going to prepare a written report and recommends and recommendations for panel enhancement, new topic areas, hot topics, recommendation for future panel managers or panelists, sort of any comments about operations in general, about how things worked. One of the changes we've had along these lines recently is we used to be able to provide coffee and refreshments for panels. We no longer can do that, so we're interested to see how people respond to that when it's bring your own coffee over, and it's the fourth day of a panel meeting. The MPL is going to be responsible for award administration. He's going to have to, he or she will have feedback and consultation with everybody who got declined. Then there's going to be a lot of reporting and summarizing, communicating success stories and highlights with USDA, Congress, the White House, OMB, and others. It's really where the NPL puts on their other hat, where they're an advocate and champion of science. And program communication, including outreach and promotion. Again, that champion role. Now, I've gone through the Ag and Food Research Initiative, but remember I talked about all the other programs that we have. There's the Biotech Risk, Small Business Innovation Research, and others. Let's run through some of those quickly. Biotech Risk is to assist federal regulatory agencies in making science-based decisions about transgenic organisms. And that might include insects or plants, whatever, into the environment. And there's two categories here. There's risk assessment, but there's also risk mitigation and management too. It's got a relatively long history. They've got about a $4 million budget, and it's funded from a set-aside from any work USDA does on biotechnology. It's competitively funded. It's going to identify and develop appropriate management practices, methods to monitor the organisms involved, and gives further knowledge about characteristics, rates, and methods of gene transfer, which are very important. You can see how important this is in the resistance to herbicides that seems to be spreading among many different weed species. Xing Kwok is the national program leader responsible for this program, and on our website, unique name, just search on the website for Xing and you'll get his contact information. Now, we have a Small Business Innovation Research Program, SBIR program. We run the program for all of USDA. It makes grants in two phases. Phase 1's $100,000, phase 2's $500,000. Eligibility is limited to small businesses. Well, why am I bringing this up in a university setting? Well, because a lot of times there's a close connection between the small business community and your university. Topic areas here are fairly broad. I'll let you read the list here. The list goes on for a couple of pages, including social science areas, biofuels, rural development. Now, university involvement in SBIR, we actually strongly encourage that. Faculty may serve as consultants or receive some contracts and continue to work full-time for the university. However, no more than 1/3 of the Phase 1 award budget or half of the Phase 2 budget may be subcontracted. Many universities have these incubators on campus. This is a great way to work with folks at that. Faculty may serve as a principal investigator on the grant, but you've got to drop your university deployment to 49% or less during the grant period, and you can't conduct the SBIR research in your university lab. The SBIR program is pretty large. It's run by Dr. Charles Cleland, Dr. Bill Goldner, Dr. Suresh Warren, Dr. Dion Toombs, and Dr. Adele Trujillo. Now we've got the SARE program, Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program, which is really looking to get knowledge right out into the hands of farmers. So if you live in an area with farmers and ranchers and they're looking at new practices and you're looking for ways to support the delivery of knowledge about improved practices, this is really where to go. It makes several different grant types. There's research and education, there's farmer and rancher grants, there's farm graduate student grants, in particular community innovation grants. These are typically relatively small grants. The grant size is set by the SARE regional centers. Here are the regions of the country that those centers serve. And this slide, this very crowded slide, includes the contact information for the folks at the individual SARE centers. The contact at NIFA is Rob Hedberg. So if you have broader questions about SARE, talk to him. If you have trouble reaching somebody at one of the regional centers, talk to Rob, and he'll see what he can do about that. Finally, what I'd like to do is give you my top 10 tips for successful grantsmanship. Let's talk number 10. Number 10 is submit on time. Submit on time. Our agency does not accept late applications. We go by the time that grants.gov stamps on the application. We do this to be fair to all applicants. Now, we make exceptions for things like Sandy or snowstorm shuts down your campus, but we do require documentation that campus was shut down during that time. So it's amazing to me how little time people will leave to actually push the button to submit. So I've had people submit and be, like right up to just seconds to go, and they're submitting. The key thing onto this is to understand the process here and how grants.gov works. Now, time can be measured very accurately. Grants.gov, on the other hand, uses other methods. Okay, so especially for some folks who are, if you're using middleware like Cayuse or some of the other things out there, remember, it's not submitted when you put your finger on it, right? And Cayuse starts churning. It's not submitted when you put your finger on it and it goes to grants.gov and they say, yeah, fine, because it can take time for grants.gov to do all the checks on that and get back to you and say, oh, gee, this is an invalid DUNS number, and you realize you've got a typo or something. So please allow plenty of time. Tip number 9, have folks review applications in sort of 2 different flavors. One, faculty really need to find some colleagues who can review it technically for them. The second thing they need to have is they've got to find somebody who's really good at catching those typos and other kinds of things that are in the application and making sure there's enough time to do this so it reads well. Now, it's a shame that people are put off by typos and other things, but it's just part of human nature. They start to wonder, if you were this careless in how you wrote the thing, how good can the science be? So please don't set that kind of a vibe up. Have somebody proofread it, and don't wait till the last minute, and don't rely on spell check for this. There's the famous story at our agency of the plant genetics application where there was those names of genes are always these weird combinations of letters and numbers and things. Well, the person at the last minute did spell check, said accept all, send in the application, and it changed the name of the gene to an expletive. So no matter how good the science was in that, you're not going to be funded and you're just going to be laughed at. So please. Now, you can review abstracts of funded projects on our CRIS website. I've got the link down here at the bottom. So you go to the NIFA website, down at the bottom of the page, if you look way down in the weeds there, there'll be a link to the current research information system, and you can see abstracts of funded projects in CRIS. Everything we funded is in CRIS. Number 8, write a meaningful and engaging project summary. There's always this first page that you have to do where you describe the project. You want to make sure that's engaging, that it's very clear that you're on the cutting edge, that there's something really cool here for the panel to take a look at, and that it's really the chance to stand out. Remember, at the panel, we're only having 3 of the panelists read and comment on this, but they all get copies of all the applications. So if there's something really exciting in your summary, everybody on the panel reads the summaries. This is a chance to get more people on your side about how exciting and innovative this work is. Some of the worst approaches are, you're so busy writing the body of the application that, gosh, it comes to the summary, what am I going to do? I know, I'll just copy and paste my first 2 paragraphs out of the introduction, and that'll be my summary. There you go. Not a good strategy. Number 7, write the proposal for the reviewers. It's very different than writing a journal article, because remember, may have a fairly broad scope of expertise on the panel. You want to capture their attention. You want to get to the point quickly and be succinct. You want them to be able to read that and come away with the so what if this is funded. If a letter of intent is required for the program, make sure that you've got, you address the priorities in the program. Describe the salient points of the program. If you If the program calls for integration, that is, we're looking for some combination of research, education, and extension, your letter of intent should mention research, education, and extension, and not just one thing. Identify outcomes from the project and follow the formatting guidelines. This is a little less critical than in the past, where we would disallow submissions for letters of intent that didn't hit all the targets we were asking for. However, we've gotten a little softer, and we now do an encourage, discourage. So if you're off target and you get a message from us that we're discouraging submission, that's a clue that the faculty member involved needs to contact the NPL and have a broader discussion about, well, why was that? Number 6, responding to reviewer comments. Not a lot of folks get funded on their first time, so maybe this is the second time you're submitting. You do get extra pages, an extra 2 pages to respond to reviewer comments. Take advantage of that, but you need to do it diplomatically. You need to have a little, what shall we say here, a little tact in how you respond to this. You want to respond in a way that shows that you've taken their comments seriously. However, we recognize sometimes the comments may be off track. At that point, you need to figure out how to phrase that diplomatically. So you say, well, they raised questions about the use of this method for this thing. On page 7, we show that it can be used. In fact, our preliminary data, and somebody else has a paper on it. So you've answered that objection. Some of the worst things to do is call the reviewers unqualified. That does not go over very well. Remember that earlier comment I had about a quarter of the panel coming back? You don't want to offend people who are on the panel with that sort of thing. And you don't want to ignore this opportunity, because if the people coming back on the panel will say, I remember this from last year. I wonder if they took my suggestion that I thought would really improve this. And there's no response to reviews there. Again, you've sent a poor tone, and it'll be tough to get up that hill. Number 5, develop a comprehensive project outline. So don't just sit down and start writing and going at it. Think about what you're going to do, how it's going to come together, and co-PDs you might need, and those sorts of things. This should then be followed closely by a timeline for completing the proposal, getting your application together. So when's the deadline for submission? That's the date I'll take it over to the Contacts and Grants Office, right? No, they've got to have some time to process it as well. How long is it going to take to get signatures? Do you have holidays or other events where the campus is closed? How much time is needed to really do a good job? Really do a good job. Number 4, goals and objectives. For integrated projects, you really need to have a clear statement about what's going to be different. What's the outcome that's going to be achieved with this project? In research projects, you have to have a clear hypothesis or some area of knowledge that's being expanded. It's not just, the effects of or observations of, but really how are you advancing science? Number 3, folks who are thinking about applying to a particular program, you really need to think about, does this fit with my career strategy? Just because money is available to do something doesn't mean that, maybe you should do it. So think about how you want to do this. Are you trying to fit a square peg in a round hole? Does the program ask for something specifically, and you're saying, yeah, I could kind of do that with this approach or in my area? Again, this gets back to building on other resources you have and thinking about your strategy more broadly. There's also a point here where you're resubmitting applications where you have to think, have I just fallen in love with this idea? Have I fallen in love with this approach? And that, peer reviewers are just never going to understand, and maybe it's time to try something different. Number 2, serve on a panel. I've talked about that. Contact the NPL. Send an email to our new reviewer email address. Please note that you can't serve on a panel if you have an application submitted to that program. And number one, read the RFA. It may seem daunting because you're going to get this thing and many of them are 100 pages or more. However, the key parts that you want to read are things like eligibility. Am I eligible to submit? Figure that out before you write something. Take a look at the funding levels, the deadlines. Are you going to be able to meet this timeline? Review criteria, other project requirements. For instance, in the bioenergy area, many times we'll limit the feedstocks that you can submit on. Last year we did not support any work on algae because DOE has invested a lot of money in algae. So you need to read that before you work up your algae proposal to submit to us. So, and of course, always contact the NPL with any questions related to anything in the RFA. So here's the summary of the top 10 list. I appreciate having time to talk to you today, and I'm looking forward to our question and answer session. I guess we're ready to begin that now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Dr. Poth. We're now going to open it up for questions from our listening audience, viewing audience. The website where you can send your emails for questions is federalupdate@missouri.edu. So please go ahead and send some questions. One question we have, what happens if the Farm Bill is not renewed?
Yes, the question is, what happens if the Farm Bill is not renewed? Many of the programs go back to the old authorizations, and actually it falls back to the Farm Bill from 1949, which would be rather exciting across a number of things. However, you've got to remember that many of our programs are authorized in older legislation and can come through. Within the continuing resolution that we recently got, which gave us half a year's worth of funding for this fiscal year, they gave us get out of jail free language. So in essence, we've got most of the programs that we had moving ahead for at least half a year. So they have until the end of March to come together and figure it out. And I'm confident after the message that voters sent to them that they'll be appropriately motivated to deal with the issues that they need to.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question in. When do you expect the challenge area RFAs to be released?
Questions about the challenge area RFAs. I believe the climate one is about to come out or out already. Bioenergy will follow shortly, and the others are in various modes of approval. It's harder for us to say that than it used to be. I gave you the structure of the agency at the beginning, where we now have an undersecretary who's a chief scientist. In the past, all approvals were within NIFA, and it was a relatively short chain. Now approvals go not only to the chief scientist, but all the way up to the secretary's office. So anytime you need to get more signatures on anything, it takes longer, and there are chances to kick things back. However, I'm optimistic that the bioenergy one will be out within 30 days.
Thank you very much. Again, if you have a question that you'd like Dr. Poth to go ahead and answer, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. You mentioned earlier that algae was one of the areas that maybe you should submit a grant proposal in. Are there any other areas that researchers should avoid?
That's within each request for applications. Within there'll be a section that talks about program priorities. After that, there's an other information section. So please read the other information section that'll have restrictions like that on it, that identify particular areas that we will not support or that we want to emphasize. That's where there'll be important information about whether or not we're encouraging teams of folks to come together, including folks from minority serving institutions, which can be an advantage for you. So take a look at that other information in there as well.
So again, read closely.
Yeah, remember that thing, what was it, number one, read the RFA?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, call with any questions or any doubts that you have about what it means.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Is there an estimation of the number of high-risk proposals that are funded, and do you have any examples?
High-risk proposals?
Yes.
Yes, we're asking. Well, we get asked this question more and more, and one of the measures of whether or not it's high risk or not is how many applications or how many projects do you have that totally fail? Totally fail, and we have a few. However, given the creativity of researchers, they always find a way to pull something out. So it gets harder and harder to say what's a complete failure. Some of the higher risk efforts have been things related to food safety, and I would say some of our things related to bioenergy as well. Food safety examples, remember there was problems with remember we had E. coli in spinach and some of the problems with that. There were a lot of routine, very old work and a lot of newer work that was all about, well, it's all about washing. We have to wash these things or have better hygiene in the field if we just keep it out of the field. And actually some of our higher risk work took a look at roots of infection with pathogens in produce and found out, guess what? The pathogens are not on the produce, they are in the produce. They're migrating in and using the same routes some pathogens use, plant pathogens use, to actually get inside the spinach. So we thought that initially when that came through, that was pretty high risk to try and show that or figure that out, or would that even happen? And we funded that, and we thought that worked out, gave great insight about how to make the food supply safer.
Okay, we have another question. Does a small business have to partner with the university for the SBIR, or is it just strongly encouraged?
Absolutely not. If you've got the capabilities on 100% within your small business, there's no reason to partner with the university at all.
Okay. Again, if you want to ask a question, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu, and we will get that question to Dr. Poth. Here's a question about international collaborations.
Mm-hmm.
Does your agency support international collaborations between U.S. and foreign researchers?
Yes, we do. We cannot make awards directly to foreign institutions. However, it's very common for foreign collaborators to be participating. We've had a long history of this, and if you think about agriculture in this country, we're growing several things as major crops here that are not native to the continental U.S. Potatoes, rice, soybeans. So if you're looking at working on those kinds of things, it makes sense to team up internationally. There are some caveats here. The State Department has a list of countries that we really can't send money to, like North Korea or Cuba or Iran, So keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Again, if you have a question, please send it to federalupdates@missouri.edu. About how long does the review process normally take?
The target for the review process is 180 days.
Okay. And after
it can be much faster, but we're continually trying to reduce that. Congress has trying to push some of that somewhat, and recently told us that we have to do the SBIR program in 90 days. However, since you usually want to give reviewers about a month to read through the applications, it really crunches the time down on, it used to take us a month to process them, a month for them to review them, then if you're going to have them in Washington for a week, and then you have to get all the paperwork back from the people you're going to fund, it's not too realistic, but we're seeing what we can do.
Okay. We have another question about the SBIR. Do you use a percentage of total funding for that program, or is it a set amount?
The SBIR program is a program that's done on what we call internally taxes of extramural grants that are done by the Department of Agriculture. And this includes both Forest Service research, the Agricultural Research Service, and National Institute of Food and Agriculture. The Forest Service and Agricultural Research Service typically do cooperative agreements with universities where they're working on research, and there's a taxed amount that comes off those cooperative agreements, which are awarded non-competitively.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Would a proposal examining impact of food preparation and modification have on food allergy response be a possible candidate for funding consideration? Or is that something they need to send you some more information about?
Yeah, a little bit about. Okay, when it comes to food, what's the role of USDA in food and health versus the National Institutes of Health? Generally, if what you're working on is about the food, that's our territory. If what you're working on is about health and the response of the people consuming it, that's NIH. Okay. So if you're looking at ways to reduce allergens in foods or mitigate allergenicity in foods or plant breeding to improve nutrition or preparation strategies that reduce allergenicity, that's us.
Okay, looking for any additional questions for Dr. Poth? Again, federal update at missouri.edu. You mentioned that you have grantsmanship workshops that are held here in DC. Is the agency ever open to going to colleges and universities to hold workshops there?
In general, we have our closest ties with the land-grant university system. There are 104 land-grant universities within the U.S. Our entire staff in our agency is less than 400 people. There's no way we can do grantsmanship workshops at even the land-grant universities. So what we do is we try to run some informally at scientific meetings and do them as we can. We're relatively small. I know that some of the larger agencies like NSF and NIH have the ability to do this, but remember their budgets are in the multi-billion-dollar category. We were really happy when we broke $1 billion.
Okay. One other question just popped up. Any major changes expected with the new NIFA director? Expecting any changes?
Expecting any changes? Oh, absolutely.
Can you give us any insight?
Well, I think that Dr. Ramaswamy is now engaging actively with the agency. We have a number of groups working looking at our internal operations and how to standardize and systematize those so that they're understandable across all our programs. Those groups have been working for about a year or so. Dr. Ramaswamy has been on board a little less than that and has given some particular charges there, but we're looking at trying to do things like be more systematic about engaging stakeholders about what they would like to see in the programs that we manage, being more effective in our communication about the decisions that are made about what to support and what not to support, and what the basis for that. Things like, gee, another agency is investing multi-million dollars in this, why should we do it too? Those kinds of things as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us here today. If we get any questions that come in a little bit later, I'll make sure to forward them to you. And folks can also contact you directly. I know your contact information is in your presentation. Mm-hmm. At the bottom of the hour, we have Michael Sieverts from the National Science Foundation coming up. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.